Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
What is going on? And Frank Bazzani back. How you doing, Frank?
What's up, nerds? I'm doing good.
Excellent. Glad to hear it, you guys. We had a fun little chat for the last, 20 so minutes beforehand, just kind of checking in on each other's lives and whatnot. And now it is time to talk about them video games. And we got a lot of video games to talk about today. It's going to be probably a bit of a beefy episode, even by our standards. Today we're going to be talking about Deathloop with some spoiler-free impressions. We've got 12 minutes talk that we'll probably also keep spoiler-free. Skatebird, Hindsight 2020, Genesis Noir, and Toem. Before we dive into any of that, though, a little bit of housekeeping for you. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like our wonderful Patreon producers do. So yeah, we're going to kick things off here with some Deathloop conversation. I finished the game last night. Cameron's been putting a lot of time into it. Frank, you've not played it yet, but you were eager to kind of like just check in with us and kind of hear our thoughts on it. So yeah, that'll be some spoiler-free stuff. So let's dive into that. Cam, let me kick it over to you, just because I haven't really talked to you about the game too much. What are you thinking about it so far?
I love it. It's probably one of my favorite games that I've played in the last couple of years. It is, I was talking to Andy Cortez about it from over at Kinda Funny, and I mentioned that it's like if a roguelite and a Souls game said, hey, what if we made a baby? And it was basically played like Dishonored.
Interesting. I'm curious what the Souls-like aspect of it that you're kind of identifying is tied to, because I did not feel Souls-like in this. I get, is it like the other player invading your game element?
There's a lot of like minor elements that remind me a lot of a Souls game.
Okay.
I guess it's not a spoiler since you pick it up right away. But one of the items that you get at the beginning of the game is essentially a
the residuum is basically like Souls. Is that what you're talking about?
So residuum's like Souls, but on top of that, you also have a mechanic where, the mechanic where the residuum acts as Soul. So you died, but hey, you still have the slab that you have as a that you get at the beginning of the game.
The reprise, yeah.
The reprise. Thank you. The reprise that has its charges. The way that it works, where then you go back to where you died and like get your residuum back from your body.
Yeah, I guess I see that.
Yeah, that aspect of it is very Souls-like. The invader aspect is Souls-like. But a lot of also like the like I would say that's the aspect of it that's very much a Souls-like. I would say that it also is for example, when you reset, quote unquote, reset at a bonfire, things go back to the way they were before. So like when you do reset, you have that aspect of it as well.
So like when the day starts over again, all the enemies are back in their normal place. Yeah,
exactly. So you have that aspect of it. And then I also felt like there's a lot of roguelite aspects to it, between like a lot of the different randomizations that happen throughout the day, depending on like, oh, well, you did this and now that's actually going to cause it. For example, I killed one of the visionaries at noon, and then in the afternoon when I went back to the same place, I got chewed out by somebody over a loudspeaker saying, hey, because you killed this visionary earlier, I have to work overtime now, and I'm going to kill you. And so come to this place, and like I got a present for you.
Oh, yeah.
And it's...
I like that one.
Like, that is an entirely... Like, if you don't do it specifically this way, then you have a completely different experience in that aspect of it. And so the idea of like the different runs having different aspects to it, especially since when you kill enemies, they'll drop randomized tokens that then at the end of that section of the day when you go back into the tunnels, you find out what they are, and those are RNG based. So you have those aspects of it that are roguelite. and then it plays like a Dishonored game. The levels are laid out like Dishonored because it's Arcane.
Yeah, of course.
And they're phenomenal. It's such a great game. There's so much replayability. I got a really great sniper rifle, but I forgot to infuse it.
You didn't infuse it? Oh, yeah.
Yep. I forgot to infuse. So I stopped playing for the night, came back, forgot to go in and infuse it before I hopped into the next area, got invaded by Juliana, and just got murked right in the face because I had messed up my jumps earlier, so I had already lost two of my two reprises.
I
so
I can appreciate that.
Man.
Yeah, I mean, like right there, that's obviously I think a lot of the fun of this game is like those kinds of stories. Like I've not turned on I've played entirely in single player only. So like anytime Juliana like is on the hunt for me, it's AI. I know it's the game. I'm not playing with like friends invading or just randos invading. So those are the options that you have for those that don't know. You can keep it kind of in a closed environment and it's just the computer, or you can set it to like friends only and you can go into friends games or friends can come into your game, or you can open it up to online mode where anybody can jump in. And yeah, I had one where I it's only happened once where I just accidentally jumped off a cliff. Like it was in I think the Updom area where it's like, oh, I know if I jump off this side of this, but like a lot of times there's a lower area down there, and not where I jumped this time. So like right off the bat, and it happened like right at the beginning of the level or whatever, and so I lost a life there. And then like Juliana's on the hunt, and I was like, oh damn it. And yeah, she caught me unawares, and then I think just there were enough other people that I got taken out and yeah, lost basically whatever progress I'd had. That was one time where I don't think I'd lost as much progress as you of like, oh, you got this like really great sniper rifle and didn't infuse it or whatever. But I definitely had a few of those kinds of instances where I set something up in the morning to do something in the noon hour, and on my way to go do that thing in the noon hour, I got killed by Juliana. And so I had to go,
Yep.
the day restarts, and I can't just jump to that, that noon thing. I had to go and redo the thing I'd done in the morning block as well. And I was like, damn it. So like those are kind of the pain points that I've encountered in that. And I had that like a couple days in a row where I had like that kind of experience happen to me. And I was like, all right, for a portion of my time here, the Juliana element of the game, I mean, and it still probably is my least favorite element of the game because I'm such a fan of the Dishonored games that are so regimented by a strict set of rules that the chaos element that Juliana introduces completely throws me for a loop a lot of times. And sometimes it'll be like, I mean, sometimes it's like I shoot her once and she's down and I'm like, yes, great. But then other times like I'm just offloading everything I have into her and she's like holding out and I'm like, what the, like, I don't understand this. It got to the point where I basically kept like a shotgun with me at all times just in case Juliana was going to invade, because that was like the thing that would reliably take her down, is if she got like in close to me, I could just like boom, 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 like, unload a complete clip of a a hefty shotgun, like a purple shotgun that I had on her, and finally like Juliana is done or whatever that text comes up. And so I was like, well, I mean, like, then I just kind of have to build that into my loadout like regularly, because I never know when she's going to show up. I didn't realize, not a spoiler, but just like in a gameplay mechanic, it was one of those things like I didn't realize until it happened that she can invade you multiple times in a day.
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I was like, what, like, why is she invading me in the afternoon? I killed her in the morning. What's going on? And the gameplay logic is like, oh, just like there are a lot of cults, Cult is reliving this day, Juliana relives the day over and over as well, and so you just might encounter like multiple Julianas in that same cycle because of the loop.
So there's more to it than that.
I mean, yeah.
When you have you done any of her?
Yes, yeah. I mean, yes. I know. Okay. But I don't want to dive into that for like spoiler reasons and stuff like that.
Oh, 100%. I was avoiding saying too much. for spoiler reasons.
Yeah.
So you know why.
Yes.
I was just I'm like, if you beat the game and you don't know why, that's a bit odd.
Yeah, no. There are definitely like narrative reasons. I'm just giving the bare bones of like, oh, because of gameplay, she can invade pretty much any time of day up to all 4 times. It's basically like from a very mechanical stance, if there is a visionary in the map that you can kill, she can also invade at that point. But if you're doing a thing where like there isn't a visionary and you're just going to a place to do a thing, you're probably safe, and I don't think she's gonna come at you.
She specifically for me, like I've always found that.
She's trying to protect the visionary, so she doesn't care if you're just going to a place that has nobody at it.
Yeah. Well, so she gets notified when the visionary becomes. So she comes in and invades when the visionary becomes aware of your presence in the map.
I mean,
so if you trigger and
sometimes
other times
it is like she is chaos. Like she will show up, even if you're like completely stealth. You haven't done anything. You haven't alerted anybody. Boom. Juliana is on the hunt. It's like, oh yeah, but yes, I mean there is a heightened sense when other people know what's going on there. So, but yeah, like that for a couple days there, and it was pretty much like Thursday night I lost a bunch of progress, and I was like, well, that was a waste of an evening of playing. And then because I play much like I did with like Dishonored, where I'm playing through like each of these areas very methodically, and I'm trying to like take out as many like. Do whatever I need to do, and I'm not, running and gunning, guns blazing, stuff like that. So I'm not spending like 15 minutes in an area and going and doing the thing. I'm taking 45 minutes to, eliminate the people on my path to my objective or something like that, and then doing the objective, and then trying to kind of make my way back, and then occasionally doing like other exploring and stuff like that, kind of going off the beaten path to find some of those like random notes and kind of get the backstory of Black Reef, and enjoy that. And so like when like Juliana then comes in, it's like, well, that was a good chunk of time that like I just lost everything I just did. Like the new information you learned sticks with you, but a lot, like especially where I was at that point in the game, like I wasn't really learning a ton of new information. It was I needed to do a specific objective, and now I need to go and do that specific objective again because, it was lost to me. So it was like that Thursday night and Friday night, and I was just like, man, if this happens again Saturday, I'm going to be really annoyed. And instead, it did not, and I basically played, another 12 hours Saturday and just beat the game at like 2 a.m. last night. So
there you go.
So yeah, very very fun game, but it is still like I will probably need to sit a little bit more with the whole Juliana element of it, because it does throw a very unique curveball to a Dishonored game, compared to to an Arcane game compared to the Dishonoreds, of course.
I would agree with that. I think that I'm much more fond of it because I love that idea and aspect of PvP.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm more of a fan of that than you are in a lot of cases. But also I like the idea that we had a really cool show idea that we're thinking about doing for some Let's Plays, and I can't wait.
Oh yeah, I mean I think it'll be fun to do as especially now that I'm like prepared and kind of like in the right mindset for it, of like, yeah, like let's record a Let's Play of like me playing and Cameron invading me, or me going into Cameron's game or something like that. That'll be a fun opportunity. But when I'm earlier in the week, when I'm seeing like Blessing out there, who's had the game for, a couple weeks, already beat the game a couple weeks ago, and is like invading people on streams and stuff like that, I'm like, that's just trolling. Like you are exploiting the fact that you have had this game for a longer period of time, and you're just trolling the people who are just trying to get their feet wet still right now. And seeing a lot of people doing that, and that being like the aspect of the game that people are getting really excited about right now, I'm like, no, I don't want. I'm already annoyed when Juliana invades and like kills me and catches me, off guard. I would be that much more pissed if I knew it was Blessing on the other end, just being a dick to me. I'm not, and that's like, I have not played the Juliana side of things. You have, and so I'm curious, kind of your impressions of that element. But like, that's not. I don't take joy in going into somebody else's game and ruining their day. and maybe that's because I haven't done that in Souls games and stuff like that, but like it's just not a relationship I'm looking to have with these kinds of games. So like it was one of the things I was always very wary about until they were like, no, you can play the game totally offline kind of thing, and it'll just be an NPC character. Especially like I do appreciate that, because within that then there is some element of like I know what to expect if Juliana's in here. But it's like versus like, oh, if I'm playing and it's somebody I know, or if it's a rando online, like, okay, they're probably going to be like camping around the objective that I have on that map, or the exit, or the antenna or whatever. And it's like, okay,
like there's
so
plenty of ways to like suss out like where they're at and like how to counter them. I love that aspect of it. Sometimes I find it fun where I do on one of them, I made a big ruckus, killed a couple of people, and then hid in a place where it's like, oh, I'm hiding from Juliana. It's like, nah, I'm playing a trap for you, Juliana. And so when the Juliana came over, it's like, I got you. It's like, nah, I got you. Bam! And except I didn't bam her with a gun. I took the machete and I wailed on her until she died.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've decided that's how I'm going to kill all the visionaries, and that's how I've killed all the visionaries so far. Is I go at them with a machete and just brutally murder them with the machete until like eventually like, because the kill animations you do with the machete are so fucking good.
I mean,
they're so bad. They're so rad, man. Yeah. They're so rad. It's so good. Like Colt is a one-man killing machine, and just with the machete is just like so awesome. Alexis, I took him out earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
And he had his like twin gold SMGs trying to shoot me. It's like, oh, it's like, guess what? No. Bam, bam, bam. Got him in the side. He like crumpled over a little bit. And then I just like took it around and just like lopped off his head. And it's like, ass.
There you go.
Eat shit.
I'm very curious to like dive into like kind of what your typical loadout is with slabs and stuff like that. But I want to give you a chance, Frank, because I think you wanted to weigh in on something a little bit ago. And sorry, we kind of like rode right over you. But what do you have any like questions for us?
Well, yeah, I think we kind of covered it a bit, but one of the things I was curious about was Juliana, and like if that was very like frustrating as a mechanic, because it's kind of it just from the outset, it kind of sounds like it could be, but I never really like losing a ton of progress. Typically, like I always find that kind of frustrating. Like you said, like, oh, I lost the whole night, like that sucks. I think I would probably have less of a problem because I'd probably be more run and gun with this one and hopefully get through it faster. But that's why I was kind of curious at how frustrating that is. And do you guys think it would be better if you could just turn that off, like in the settings, if you could just like completely, like I know you can do it so you're single player, like it's the AI, but you think you could just turn it off completely?
Yeah,
like, I mean, that would make it a stronger game.
It was something I thought about occasionally of like, man, I wish there were a thing I could get, like a trinket I could get that like meant she wasn't going to invade in this, because I've already lost 2 lives in this thing. The last thing I need is for her to like come in here and screw me over. But there is a good reward as like the counterbalance. It is another risk reward. Yeah. So yeah, when you take her out, you usually get like 2 slabs or slab upgrades, which you would otherwise only be able to get from killing one of the visionaries. And even there, you only get 1. So you're getting like good abilities from there. You're also getting like a ton of residuum from her and a ton of trinkets and stuff like that that are going to either make your character better or your weapons better. So like there's a lot of like benefit to taking her out. And it's I think that's the trade-off, is that like, yes, it's unfortunate when you lose that progress, but when you take her out, like you're walking out of that mission like so much better off because of that. And especially like the having it be the AI, there is like that is the closest thing the game gets to probably an easy mode, is if it's the AI doing it, because you do kind of start to learn her patterns and her behavior as the AI. And, like for me at least, my experience was she tended to be on the rooftops. And so I knew like, okay, I'm going to be up on the rooftops too. So she's not like, taking me out by sniping me from below. And then she's also very talkative. So like you can like, she'll be, like saying like, Colt, where you at? Or something like that. And so you can like, if you're not hearing her, she's probably not very, very close to you. And it's like you probably hear her before you'll see her a lot of times,
Yeah.
or especially if like me, you had the subtitles on, you'll see her subtitles and she'll be, talking to you or something like that, and kind of like taunting you and calling you out. So like there are a lot of elements, and even in the cases where I do end up dying to Juliana, it's because I tried to go in guns blazing, or I tried to like take her out with a headshot or something like that and missed, and alerted her to my presence, and stuff like that. So like there are ways to be smart about it, and a lot of time I just was like more stressed out than smart. Like one of my favorite tactics with her, honestly, is using the Nexus slab, which is if you've played Dishonored, it's like the power that like links enemies together. And so if you take out one of those enemies, it takes out everybody who's linked. And so while she will take, a bit more of a beating, if you link her up with one of the the random Eternalists, the random peons, and you just shoot that guy in the head, boom, she's down, and you get that big reward without like any of the real stress and hurt and headaches. So I think the reward for taking her out is just is worth the occasional frustration you get from losing stuff. And even in those times where, yes, I lost a lot of progress, I still was getting a better feel of the map and where the enemies are and stuff like that. So there's still like, even though I didn't have a new thing checked in my, list of things to do, I still learned stuff from playing that section of the game before she killed me. So it's there's a trade-off, as always, but I think the benefit of her being there or the rewards you get from her when you take her out are well worth that, frustration. It was kind of thing, like if it kept happening, I would have been a little bit more annoyed, but it was 2 times, and then I was kind of able to push through and kind of overcome it yesterday. Cam, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, and even if you don't, like, for example, if your reprise is down, you only are on that last life. There's plenty of strategies to use to trick her into going to one part of the map that's away from the antenna. So there's an antenna that you have to hack that prevents you from getting into, essentially ending the level earlier. Because she basically locks you out of your escape route. Yeah. And when she does that, there's an antenna that you can hack that lets you get into the house, or not into the house, into the tunnels. And I'd say that because one of the is right by a place in the game. But what I will say is that, like, the great thing about that is, like, there are times when I was playing against people where it's like they are way better than me. They have like way more slabs than I do. Like, I'm not prepared for this, or like I'm on my last life. I'll make some ruckus on like one corner of the map, sneak my way back around, hack the antenna, and just get out of dodge. There's plenty of strategy to that as well. Like, the best part about it, I think, is the fact that you don't have to kill Juliana. You can do that. You can do that workaround with the hacking. And on top of that, it's super fun to leave Juliana alive, because if you have Juliana alive, you kill the visionary, and then you hack the antenna to escape. She can't reactivate the antenna. So once you hack the antenna, it's down. You're good. Go back to what you're doing, kill the visionary, bounce, and it just adds insult to injury. Because it's like, I could have killed you anytime I wanted to, but I didn't. Ha ha ha.
Sure. Great. That's what their takeaway is, instead of like thinking, oh, he was a coward, he just ran. Because admittedly, again, and this is coming from having played entirely against very true. Having played entirely against the AI, I don't think there was any time that, like, when Juliana came, I didn't kill her or she didn't kill me. I don't think I ever did the I'm hacking the antenna and I'm just gonna leave. Because there was yes, I could have done that, and that might have, alleviated some of that stress and that frustration I'd had. Because you don't even need to, at that point, you don't even need to kill the visionary if you haven't already. Like, you can just run away. You can just unlock the antenna and leave, and then just come back the next day and do that objective or whatever. There's no real penalty for that, apart from, you got to do another day in the cycle or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely one of those, I just, anytime she came in, I was like, all right, it's you or me. And yeah, I don't think I ever did the left like you left and left Juliana alive or something like that. But yeah, it's still, I think, probably my least favorite element from a gameplay perspective, just because it's a very unknown variable in a game that is so wonderfully set by like cause and effect kinds of rule sets, and it's one of the great things. Like you mentioned that as kind of a feature of roguelites earlier, Cam, and it's not something I ever thought about as a roguelite thing. I just think of it as like, oh yeah, if you do something here in the morning, that's going to affect that same place if you come back in the afternoon. I just think of that as a Dishonored thing, a la like the high chaos, low chaos system from the Dishonored games, or just even in that game, there would be like certain elements of like, oh, if you kill this person on a map, then you're going to miss out on something later on. Whereas if you leave them alive, they'll be like a treat for you, when you come back later or something like that. And this game has a ton of those fun little things, like secrets here and there. Whereas like some of it's there's like a couple at least where it's even like, hey, this person is like, the scripting of the game will see this person die if you don't intervene, but if you intervene, they might live to see another day. And you can come back and like visit them, in the afternoon, or a thing will be unlocked because they were able to come back by at noon or something like that and unlock their shop. There are cool little elements like that of like, hey, there's even like, yes, you can go in and kill everybody in a map. But then if you don't, how does that play out in the universe of the day and stuff like that? I think there's a lot of fun, just discoverability in there, just like in a lot of the arcane games. So yeah, Cam, tell me about the experience of playing as Juliana and invading, because I've not done it myself, and I've not even really watched a ton in the way of like people doing that and the different strategies. I've seen like highlights of like, again, Blessing just like killing some guy 3 times and then, haha, I gotcha. But yeah, I don't know what that gameplay is particular. I know there's like a slab that basically lets you like disguise yourself as an NPC or as Colt. So yeah, what's the gameplay as Juliana like?
It's fun. It's very different because you're not worried about. You don't have to worry about traps. You don't have to worry about turrets or security cameras or anything like that, because they'll all just like ignore you.
Mm-hmm. Unless if Colt has hacked them, would they attack you? Would they see you as a bad guy?
I don't know. I've never encountered that before.
Okay, because that is definitely a strategy I use. Is like I hack every turret I can, and just like I specifically have a trinket, like a personal trinket that is like you like any turrets you've automated just become murder machines, and like they just like I took out pretty much all of Alexis's party in one run with like 3 turrets just like lined up at the entrance, and like they would take out people, and then people would like run and try and take out and then other turrets would take them out. And I was like, just murder everybody here.
Yeah, because there's like a closet that has like a couple of turrets in it.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few where like you have to kind of hack, and like so you have to like kind of like hide over. But even there, I have like another one that is like hack really quick. So like even if the turret like gets its sights on me, I usually have it hacked before it starts firing at me, and then I can just pick up the suitcase or like deactivate it, where then it becomes a suitcase that you can carry, and then you can like deploy it basically anywhere else you want. You don't have to keep turrets. They're not like locked into their location. So yeah, it's a fun little like that's one of my tactics, is just being like, all right, I'm gonna let these guys do the work while it is like I'm gonna have these guys. They're gonna make a ton of noise. I'm gonna shift around the map and then go in kind of the back way and do some cleanup. But anyway,
the aspect of that, back to Juliana. I don't know, because I also think that if I had gone past one that had been hacked by Cole. If I hadn't already been, because if you are not, if an enemy is not like aware or like that Colt is there, like is not like does not intend violence towards Colt, the turrets won't activate. Mm-hmm. Like they'll keep doing their turn thing, which is great for incognito purposes. But
I mean, if the turret sees you in the blue beams, if you're Colt. The turret sees you, it'll mess you up.
Fire on you. But I've not encountered that as Juliana, so I don't know. It might be the case as well. Like just it's Cold takes over one. If you walk in front of it, it shoots you. Yeah. But I know as Cold, when you take over and you hack one, if the NPCs, the Eternalists, are walking past it and they don't have violent intentions, it doesn't like start shooting them.
No, it does. Yeah. Like if the turret is green instead of blue, like it'll mess up anybody but Colt in its path.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. That's what I do is I'll like they'll be sitting there hanging out and I will drop the turret like basically like in front of them or whatever, and it will.
You'll drop the turret. I've talking about like stationary turrets that I have.
I mean, yeah, those two, like they behave with the same rule set. It's just you can take one of those stationary turrets, you can turn it into a briefcase, and then like set it.
For me,
I think they were probably just out of the range of it. So would be my guess.
I've seen him walk. I thought I saw him walk in front of it, and like the turret didn't like. No, actually, I might be thinking of like a different error that I found.
I mean, the cameras won't do anything. I don't know I don't know the benefit really of hacking a camera. I
might be confusing a lot of that.
Yeah. The cameras, if you hack them, it's like, okay, well now it's not going to alert anybody in my presence, but it doesn't do anything if like somebody else walks in the camera path.
Yeah, I guess not. Maybe I'm thinking of like the camera alarm was like setting off a turret.
Oh yeah, that'll definitely do
and
that.
So yeah, okay, then that's what I'm thinking of. That's the issue I'm thinking of. Also, I've but I will say that as Juliana, it's a lot of fun because you pre-select your loadout, and she automatically has access to like purple guns. Okay. So like each of the guns that she picks up has different traits, and they unlock based on not what you gather on the map, but rather the points you get. So Juliana works off a points-based system, where different things that you do give you different points. So, like, just any match will give you 25 points. Just invading a Colts, like a Colts area will get you 25 points. But after that, like, it's about, like, did you kill Colt? Did you kill other people? Did you, like, what you did, how you used, what, like, weapons you used, how you got around things and did things. They all give you a bunch of different points. And it's super cool and really a lot of fun. So... it rewards you for being very creative in a lot of ways.
So as Juliana, if you decide to just go rogue and be like, all right, yeah, I'm going to help Colt for this run, and you go and kill like the Visionary or something like that, do you get points for that?
I don't know if she can kill the Visionaries.
Oh, okay. It seems like she could.
She can kill the Eternalists, but I don't know if there's a mechanism that lets you kill the Visionaries.
I mean, I would I don't know. Maybe like it does that video game thing of like if you aim at them, you can't pull the trigger if you're aimed at a Visionary. But I'd certainly be curious if you're running around as Juliana, if you can take out the Visionary before Colt does, what that would do. But that's
killing Visionaries as Juliana. Has anybody tried killing a Visionary to mess with Colt? For instance, if you kill Fia earlier than the afternoon, she never visits Charlie. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Wow. All right.
So you can. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Oh wow. That is nasty. That is nasty and awful.
I imagine. I mean, if you do it, the game, I'm sure, like, props up in that Colts game and says, like, Fia is dead or whatever. But, yeah.
Wow, that's wild. That is wild.
I mean,
okay, cool.
That's an extra trolly thing, I guess, in that regard, that I don't want to dive into too deep for, like, spoiler purposes or whatever. But, yeah. It's definitely an element of the Juliana aspect where I'm like, oh yeah, I wonder if like, oh, this Juliana is just going on a murder spree and helping Cole clear the map, and then maybe still tries to take out Cole because hey, the day is going to end anyway, so who cares? And she just needs to vent some frustration and take out Igor or something like that. So what loadouts do you tend to rock with the slabs there, Cam?
My loadouts are usually Chronesis and invisibility.
Okay. That is like I've played around a lot with invisibility like early on, but I typically run with shift and nexus. I like Alexis, I think was like the last one I took out. So like Carnesis was because that's who you get that slab from. Like it was one of the last slabs I got, and I really only got it when I like grabbed it to infuse it, and I don't think I've used it again since. So it's one of those like, oh, I have not used that power at all. So I'm curious how you utilize that in your gameplay. You just turning invisible and then making enemies fly in the air.
No, I haven't done any of that yet.
Okay.
I barely picked up the telepathy. Not telepathy, telekinesis.
I mean, that's what the Carnesis
slab.
power is.
Carnesis power? I'm thinking...
Are you thinking
not
Havoc?
Carnesis. I'm thinking not of Carnesis. I'm thinking of the teleportation one.
Shift.
Okay. Yeah, shift. I've been using a lot of shift and invisibility. That's what I've been doing.
Okay. Yeah.
I just got Carnesis because I just killed Alexis.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. I was like, oh, okay. Because yeah, that's definitely one especially like looking at the trophies and stuff like that, where there's like one that's like, hey, get 3 headshots on people that you've like flung into the air with Carnesis. I'm like, okay, well, I'll have to try and figure that one out at some point. But I've not played around with Carnesis at all, really. It's like a fun power, but that's a much more like aggressive power kind of slab compared to like shift or invisibility or even the Nexus one, where it's like, okay, you're like linking as many people together to, take out people altogether. Because that's the kind of thing like in a Dishonored, it was like, okay, I only have 1 stun dart, but I want to take out, 4 guys, so I'm going to use that link. And yes, you could use that link and also kill them, but it also was like very handy in those kind of like non-lethal runs. Versus here, it's like, well, you only have lethal as an option. There is no non-lethal playing in Deathloop, hence the death title. But it still comes in very handy in some of those situations. Whereas, like, launching somebody to the air or like shooting them back with Carnesis powers, like, well, there's no real way to do that stealthily. So. Have you played around with any of the upgrades for any of those slabs?
No, I'm just barely getting the upgrades, man. I spent like my early hours of this game really just piecing things together and like getting a like good arsenal of weapons.
Okay.
Most of my loadout with slabs is pretty basic right now, but my weapons loadout is not basic at all.
Okay.
I have
got any of them gold guns?
I have 1 gold gun, the gold sniper rifle I picked up.
Okay.
So
you did go back and get it a second time and infuse it time?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I did that. That was my biggest priority the following run.
Yeah, I got that one, and then I've encountered a couple times I've taken out Juliana. She's dropped it, and it's had like different perks to it. So I'm like, do I want to take this one too? Because like I think right now, like the perk I have on it is like a very, very good zoom. But then like one was like, if you shoot, an enemy will just continue to bleed out. It's like, oh, that's an interesting tactic. But yeah, that's another element to like, hey, if you take Juliana out, you might also get a really good weapon from her too. Back to your point, Frank. Yeah, so you got some good handy guns. Cool.
Yeah, I picked up from Igor. I got his rifle that has like the his rapier that has that additional zoom to it, and also does more damage. And then I also have a I don't recall if I picked this up from somebody. I think I might have picked this up from Juliana. Actually, it is a one of those machine guns that does a like that it's just a really good one.
Is it the one of the pepper mills?
Yeah, one of the pepper mills. It's really good. Like I really enjoy it. And then I picked up a sniper. Before that, I was using the purple nail gun that you get in the museum if you go there in the morning.
Okay.
I was trying to do a bit more of a stealth run, but now I'm just like 100% like long range capabilities. Like I'm here to do that. And if I want to stealth, I will take out the machete and do that instead. I am loving it, man. I'm loving my time with this game.
Yeah, I have a tribunal. I don't remember if this might have been like a pre-order was because I got like the deluxe edition or something like that. But I have a tribunal that's basically got like a suppressor perk on it, so it basically acts as a silenced gun. You can find those in the world too. And yeah, I have like weapon trinkets on that basically like make headshots really easy, increase accuracy and increase range, I think. So it's basically like I'll shoot Nexus at a batch of like 4 enemies or something like that. It'll link them all up. I'll pull that gun out and just like pop one in the head, and boom, they all go down. I'm like, yes, that is incredibly satisfying. Love it. And now I can move on to the next part of this map. Because yeah, sometimes I'm just like, I don't think I can effectively get in there behind all of these people to do the machete kill. But that also can be very satisfying. Like there's one area where like, you'll walk out of the tunnels basically, and there'll be somebody basically like sitting on a thing with their back to you, and you just link them up and you can take out a couple guys and you just like machete kill him, and like you'll pull him back and just like slice his head off. And it's like, well, that was gruesome. But also he just disappears immediately after that. So it's not like you're going to see the headless body there.
It's rad, man. I love this game so much. It really is like, for me, this is a Game of the Year contender, which is crazy because we have so many Games of the Year contenders this year. So I'm having a great time, man. I'm really enjoying it. Yeah. I really can't wait to hop back into it.
Just a heads up, your camera's gone out of focus. Okay, there, you're back.
Okay,
so one of the things I will be very curious to talk to you about, or excited to talk to you about, as you get further into it, and basically once you've beaten it, will be the lore. Because yeah, I think there's a lot of there were a lot of moments, especially as I was playing yesterday, which was like I probably played about half of my time with the game yesterday, just like all day kind of thing. And there were definitely a lot of moments there where I was like, oh, I bet Cam loves this kind of shit. Because and it's a thing common in arcane games, elements like the baseline story of what's going on here in the loop is this, company, Eon, came in. I always have a hard time, and I always say Aeon because of Final Fantasy X. But Eon brought all these people to this place to do this, experiment, but very clearly, it was built on the remains of other things. And so there's a history upon a history upon a history of Black Reef that you can kind of find and do some digging. There's still a handful of secrets that I've unearthed parts of, but I still there's one area where it's you need 3 codes to unlock this, this vault or something like that. And I found 2 of them, and I still need to find that 3rd one and then go and dig in there and see what, secrets are hidden behind there. Even in my final day that I did last night, I went to a place at a certain time of day that I had not been to that combination yet. So a thing opened to me, and I was like, oh, okay, there's a new thing I can do here. And it led me to a new weapon. And it was I didn't have to do that to, finish the mission of the objective of the day or whatever. But it was I haven't been here this time of day. Let me investigate and see what this is. And it led down that whole kind of rabbit hole of oh, this is a thing from a before time kind of element of this island. And I love just kind of exploring and identifying and seeing, how that kind of uncovers things. And it also would have been very interesting because elements that I unearthed there with the context I had made sense. But if I'd discovered that first and then a later thing in the game, at some other point, I would have been oh, that's what those things were. And so I love that this game kind of, because of its, flexibility and storytelling, is able to tell you things in those different orders. And you're going to have people encountering things just in a different, approach. So yeah, there's definitely still a ton of other things for me to explore when I hop back into it, and I'm very excited to continue to do so. But yeah, really, really solid game. Still, I will say, I've been thinking about this a lot as I was playing it. It does lose a lot of the other Dishonored elements that I liked. I don't think the arsenal of weapons is as robust and vibrant as the Dishonored games were. In large part because they don't need to give you a whole bunch of stealth options like stun bombs and stuff like that. But even on the grenade side of things, I feel I was very limited. It was basically okay, you have a grenade, you have your machete, and then you have a trio of guns that you can take at any time. And you can pick different guns. The fact that you're limited to 3 guns and 2 powers for each entry out into the world. I was oh, I wish I had like there are times where I'm running around with like Shift and Nexus, and I'm like, oh, I wish I could have used, one of those other powers here. I wish I could have, had invisibility right now to, turn that on and do, this approach. So there's I don't like that element of it as much as I did from Dishonored games, but it is still very much like Arcane, firing on all cylinders and doing some really good stuff. So shout out to Deathloop, and I look forward to discussing it more with you, Cam, as you get further. And yeah, maybe us sitting down and doing some of those invading each other's games kinds of Let's Plays. We'll have to try and coordinate that. Are you going to check Deathloop out, Frank, or is this a game that you're probably going to pass on?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to check it out. I'm definitely excited to dive in there and play around with it. I like the Dishonored games, but I notoriously play those as like action games because the action is actually really good. Like they control so well, and it's so fluid and fun. And I've had so many crazy like moments of like fighting 40 guards at the same time when like you're not supposed to be able to do that, but it's so fun. So that's why I'm like, I've been so hyped that they like actually leaned into that and they made an action game. So that's one of the things I've actually just been super looking forward to, and I'll definitely hope to play it by like the end of the year. And if anything, I'm a little bit more interested now that we've been able to kind of chat about it.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, if you have any other questions, feel free to like ping me and be like, "Yeah, what do you think about this element of the game or something?" I can, happy to dive into that. I mean, to the other Dishonored elements, like I do like that each, there's basically 4 main areas in the game, and you can visit them up to 4 times of the day. Like there's a morning block, there's a noon block, an afternoon block, and an evening block. And there's like, so that's basically 16 combinations, but there's also like, there are 2 iterations of that don't have anything. So like there are 2 times a day where it's like, oh, I can't go to this area for this time for whatever reason. But each of those permutations has different things to encounter and to explore, and so there will be things that are only open at this time of day on that map. So if you go to that map any other time of day, it's going to be locked off. You're going to get like those messages in air basically saying like, oh, nobody's home or something like that. So there are like certain things that you can only do one point in time, but then otherwise it is like the game continues the Dishonored, use of verticality in level design, I think in really fun ways, as well as just like all sorts of paths in and out of places. Like there's almost always like 2 ways into a place, so that you got, you're to give you that like choice and variety in how you want to approach something. So, but moving on from that, let's dive in, Frank. Unless you have any final thoughts there, Cam, on Deathloop, I'm going to take us on to 12 minutes. Anything, Cam?
For 12 minutes?
I was saying, do you have any final thoughts on Deathloop?
Oh, no. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Then, yes.
Sorry if I'm a bit quiet. I'm quite a bit tired from this, from a long week.
Okay.
Apologies.
No problem. So, moving on to 12 minutes. You said you finished this one up, Frank, recently. This is one I hopped in and played a couple weeks ago. I sat down to start doing a let's play for it, but then I failed at some of the early puzzle solving, and I was like, this is not making for a good let's play. So I scrapped it 10, 15 minutes in or something like that. And then just never ended up talking about it on, whatever episode of the following week. So I've also played through 12 minutes. So eager to hear your thoughts. So what did you think of 12 minutes?
I'm a little bit I think middling on it, because I'm definitely just kind of in the middle there of I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate it. I think a lot of people did legitimately dislike it and not really enjoy it, which I'm not quite there, but I am middling and a little bit more towards that side. I definitely I was very hyped and excited about it. I've been watching this one on the periphery for years, especially as it's kind of changed and kind of come and gone with different trailers and stuff. But then I was excited to actually dive in and finally go through it, and there is some things I liked about it, but there's a lot I think I mostly just didn't. I think the game tries to do a lot of things, and I think it just kind of fails it. I don't want to say fails, but I think it kind of falls flat on a lot of the things it tries to swing for. And one of the things that I even really gets me about it is like the performance of the cast that they got. I thought like wasn't particularly great. It's not even that it's like bad, but it's they have like they use kind of those Annapurna connections to get some of these amazing actors,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody gives like a really good performance or like a standout performance, and a lot of the times their performances don't line up like with each other. Because obviously they weren't like together when they recorded these things, but there's totally things where crazy things are happening, and I feel like the voice acting doesn't line up to that. And then there's times where I feel like it's kind of overacted,
Mm-hmm.
where like they're acting super crazy because something's happening, but I don't feel like the tone really fit like what was happening. Like if that makes sense. Like sometimes it like was too light when crazy things were happening, and sometimes when some crazy things were happening, it was like I feel like it wasn't always like super on point, I guess, if that makes sense sometimes.
Yeah, no, definitely. I very much kind of felt a bit the same, and I don't chalk that up as like a voice acting thing so much as a direction thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the guy making the game also was the the voice director on this, but yeah, that's an issue I see a lot of times. It's very easy to make in video games. So yeah, I encountered a bit of the same with like. It's the kind of thing I think of something like Final Fantasy, what was it 13? I always think back to, because Troy Baker as Snow in that game is giving like one of the most like dull performances, and Troy Baker is a very charismatic and energetic guy, as we know, as his career would continue to go on and show. So I don't think it's their acting so much as they just weren't like asked to do something more, and a lot of times in those cases where they're not recording together, you do have issues of like, well, I have no idea how they delivered the line, so I'm not responding to how they delivered the line. I'm just reading the line on the page as it appears to me, and assuming that that's going to match up. And that really comes down to the director to be like, actually, I think their line is going to be more like this, so you should really kind of respond in this manner or something like that.
It's very much the Peter Dinklage effect with Destiny.
There you go.
Peter Dinklage, not a bad actor, not like, and there are some really great lines in Destiny, but they literally had a guy sit down at a booth for a couple days with like 50,000 pages of dialogue to read through, and so a lot of that fell flat. So
Yeah.
Same problem.
Yeah. So yeah, I think 12 Minutes does suffer from that. And it's interesting because I think you and I both came at it from a similar perspective of like, we've seen this game for years. And then like it came out and a whole bunch of people had very like strong opinions on it. And I ended up actually like unfollowing a few people who were just being assholes about like their criticism on it. Like, I'm like, if you don't like the game, that's fine. But like, don't just be a dick to the one-man team that like has been working on this game for 6 years or whatever,
pouring their heart into it.
Yeah, like just because it doesn't do the things you wanted it to do narratively or something like that. From the narrative perspective, I think it's interesting, but yeah, I think I do agree in that like it doesn't all come together in ultimately like an incredible, like it very much was like a game I played and I thought about it for like a night or two, and I can look back on it and be like, okay, like when I do think about it through this lens of like how I think like what the real ending means or whatever, I'm like, okay, that's like an interesting idea. I don't know if it gets conveyed appropriately or like completely through the gameplay, and it is like, it's left up to a little too much interpretation at the end of the day. But I enjoyed it. Did you? I'm just curious. So obviously you were playing on Xbox, I'm guessing. Did you? And I know you are a trophy hunter. Did you go through and like do all of the things to like get 1,000 achievement points on this one?
Yeah, no, I for sure did.
Okay,
And
I did as well. Yeah. Because most of it is like, oh, you have to do like really kind of like out like things that you wouldn't necessarily naturally do in playing through the game. So like I played through it not really paying attention. Then I was like, okay, so if I want to do these things, I basically need to go back and like replay the game, because you have to like check in on a lot of things at like different points in the overarching story. And And I was like, well, okay. I mean, like, now that I know what I need to do for this game, that'll take me all of like an extra hour or two or whatever. And so I was like, yeah, I'll knock those out. Sure, why not? I don't play on Xbox too much. I'll take 1,000 point, gamer score on this game for the nothing it is. And doing that, even though I will say, like, doing those things was like, I appreciate it because it introduced me to like other thematic ideas that I had missed because I wasn't looking at these pictures throughout the game and seeing that they were changing and stuff like that. So like I liked that as I guess somewhat simple as that, like the achievements were for it. I appreciated that they like put the game into a new light for me. So what was your experience on that front? Like, did you know going in, like, oh, like, did you go in with a guide and stuff?
So I went in just like checking it out by myself at first, and then before I even hit the hour mark, I eventually just broke and went to a guide because like I play a lot of these adventure
pretty
games.
much the same, yeah.
Well, it's like I play these adventure games and like I like them. And there's another one I'm going to talk about later after this. But if I'm really quick to just go pull up a guide, especially like I don't want to sit here for forever and just mess with it. And this is a game that is very much about like wasting entire loops of like, okay, I tested one thing, how does that work? And and some of the answers I also think are a bit obtuse even for an adventure game, which reminds me of like old adventure games. But that's what people complain about like old 90s adventure games and not now, is that like they were way more obtuse.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think. Some of the things are obtuse, and I think some of the puzzle solutions are just a bit weird, even though they make sense. I'm like, that's a weird puzzle to just have in a game.
Like one of the very early ones that I like. I mean, again, not a spoiler thing, because it's like one of the first ones you kind of have to do to like progress. But it was like, how do you prove to the person that you're in a loop? And I was like, okay, well, they gave me a gift, so I know what's in that gift, so I can use that. And they were like, okay, sure. I mean, you're just a dick because you clearly like opened it or something like that. And but then they were like, okay, I need something else. And I was like, what other thing in this room am I supposed to like point to? And like the solution ends up being like, point to the window and tell her about the lightning that's going to happen. And I didn't catch that it's like, oh, the weather said it's going to be a clear day or whatever. So yeah, I was like, that right off the bat, I was like, okay, it would have taken me way too long to like figure that one out myself. So yeah, I was all too happy to go to a guide pretty quickly on myself.
Well, and then it was because the one that kind of did me and was kind of similar, and it's also very early in the game, at least for what I was trying to mess around with, where like you have to interact with the light switch multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like that was just one where I feel like I never would have figured that out. If like I don't know what it would have taken for me to just sit there and start like it's like and mess with that like multiple times. And then so that's why I'm like, there's a couple where I think it like the puzzle itself can be a little bit weird, and then there's even times where I think like the game tries to hint to you like what a solution is, or like because she comments about the storm, and every time you do the loop it thunders, and she's like, oh, thunder, and like she comments about it, but it's like, but I'm with you where like, yeah, but you never got the inclination that it was trying to hint to you to talk about the weather before it happens, where it's like there's other things that she hints to, and after I learned the solution, I'm like, okay, now I get that that's a hint.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem like a hint at all, like, and that's where the game is really like hands off for the most part, pretty much about just letting you experiment and have fun and play with stuff. And part of the thing I think is fun about it is it's that classic adventure game of like, yeah, you could just go flush stuff down the toilet, and like you can call numbers on the cell phone that don't matter. Like there's just things you can do that are there just to interact with them, and so that's a little bit fun. But then that's when it gets like, it's such a small apartment that it gets weird that there's just some items that don't mean anything to the entirety of the game. Like, yeah. And then like, so that's just another like weird thing where I'm like, I could see a different version of this that had like way more things to interact with and play with and like mess with. Yeah. But like ultimately, like I think you even said the same thing earlier, which I think is the perfect way to put it. It's like, it's an interesting game. Like it was interesting, like what it did, just some of the ideas, and even just the actual gameplay and your narrative and kind of messing around with it. Like a lot of it was interesting. Like I said, though, I just don't think it landed at like everything it was trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that I talked with Logan, I think, at some point, in that it really wasn't until like right before the game came out, and maybe I talked with you about this as well, Frank. Like right before the game came out, or like when people started talking about the game as an adventure game, is when I first realized it was an adventure game. Because I feel like it's one of those that, I mean, like I might have like known that it was an adventure game from when I saw it, 5 years ago on a Kind of Funny Let's Play / like GDC stream or something like that, but I'd forgotten that, and so every other time they've kind of shown it since, it's like the thing they highlight is the loop nature and the performances, and they got Daisy Ridley and James McAvoy and Willem Dafoe, so like those were the things they were spotlighting, and it wasn't, okay, you need to like walk over to the fridge and open the fridge and pull something out of the fridge. Like it wasn't that element of the game that was being showcased. So it was an element of like, oh, that's not what I was expecting this game to be. I don't know necessarily what I was expecting the game to be outside. I guess I was probably just expecting more of like a narrative, choose your own adventure, figure out the right like questions to ask, which there's an element of that too. But yeah, it was just more of like, but you also need to like solve the puzzle by touching, like by, grabbing the right item in the environment. And, at some point, like pouring pills into a water glass or something like that, and what's that going to what's that going to do, and who's that going to affect, and all that stuff. It was a very, like, I didn't hate my time with it in the way that I've seen like some people, but it very much was like ultimately, like, I'm glad this was a Game Pass game, and I was able, like, I felt like there was really no harm, no foul in it, apart from, an evening of my time. But yeah, it's one that, like, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend somebody, hopping in, unless they're like interested in, like, like the almost the philosophical nature of some of the stuff. And then I think like a lot of the frustrations and complaints come out of like some of the, the twists regarding the relationships of some of these characters and stuff like that, which, like, while I didn't see coming, I was also at the same time like, oh, I mean, that's interesting because it's a dynamic I've written some like short stories and some ideas about myself. And so like I was like, oh, this is, like, I appreciated almost that like another writer had kind of like, found a way around to this idea and this notion. So yeah, it was I didn't hate my time with it, but it's also probably not going to show up anywhere on my game of the year at the end of the year list. It was just kind of an experience I had. It was worth an evening of my time on Game Pass, especially, because I was like, I'm not going to have the patience to do this without a guide. So like, I just kind of took advantage of the fact that there were guides out there, and was like, okay. And then it does give you like, and here's like a variety of different endings that you can get and explore, and what each of those means, I think is, interesting in and of itself. And ultimately like kind of fuels the, in my opinion, like true ending of the game, and what that real ramification means and all that stuff. Even the real meaning behind 12 minutes or whatever, I think was interesting at the end of it all, even if the trip to that point was a little, up and down throughout.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all that, and that's where like I still kind of enjoyed my time with it overall. Like, but I wouldn't recommend it a ton necessarily, unless you're like particularly interested in that kind of like adventure game or that experience, or you're really interested in that like narrative. But that's kind of where I'm at. Where like it was on Game Pass. I downloaded it, played it for one night, had fun. I think for people out there, I think a guide is the way to go. Like, I just think you just follow a guide, and I think trying to get the achievements is actually the way to go too, because at that point the game just took off a lot more for me in terms of how much fun I was having with like the not only following the actual narrative, but then when you follow some of the achievements, it kind of walks you through most of the endings to get those achievements. And that's when I was like, okay, seeing all of the different permutations of like an ending, even though it's not the right ending and the loop just keeps going, I was like, some of them are kind of interesting and some of them are really wild, when I'm like, man, you have to do a bunch of stuff to get like a really specific ending, but then like that information just keeps building, through in other loops too. But that's when I started having a lot more fun with it. Is just kind of following a guide and trying to get the achievements. It's like when I started having a lot more fun with it. So that's what I think is recommend people out there do if you check it out.
Yeah, it is very interesting that like this game is coming out the same year as a Deathloop, as a Returnal, as you know, Hades is making
Loop
it
Hero.
to as Loop Hero. Yeah, I mean the era of loop games is certainly interesting because I mean from a design perspective, I think there is a lot more to think about there than people really anticipate. Like, oh yeah, if you change this thing, then this character who's programmed to do something else with it later can't, and so you kind of need to figure out what's the response to that. Do they basically like tell you to do they, for in my case it was like, oh, they wanted to set the table and I had taken the mugs, and so they can't set the table, so they're like, all right, well, if you want to do it, you can go ahead and set the table, and if you don't set the table, then just that little part of the scene isn't going to play out, and you kind of like end up bypassing it. And what does that mean for the next bit of scripting or something like that? Similar to like Deathloop, if you take out this person who is going to do something in the afternoon, but you take them out in the morning, how does the afternoon change as a result, or something like that? So yeah, it's an interesting era of games that we like that 2020 and 2021 has kind of stumbled into, but I enjoy it for the experimentation notion of it.
I'm with you there because I had that same thought where I thought it was funny how people just kind of arrive at the same ideas. Like in gaming, certainly, like we'll get one year where like multiple games all do the same thing, and it's not like one stole the idea from another. I just think it's funny that multiple people out there separately were like, I have an idea for a loop thing,
yeah,
and then in 2021 they all just crash on top of each other.
Yeah, especially because
like the year we got bows at E3 where every game had a bow and arrow. It was like 2013.
Yeah. I mean, it very much is like the like you think about this game in particular, 12 minutes. The guy's been working on it for at least 6 years that I know of, and probably before that even. So like it's an idea he's had for a while, and then you have somewhere along the line the people at Arcane are like, hey, let's do Groundhog's Day but with murder. And Housemarque does the same thing with Returnal a little bit, and so yeah, it's an interesting dynamic that just within this span of time, all these same ideas are hitting. It's the Dante's Peak and Volcano of
Yep.
or Armageddon and Deep Impact, and whenever we get those movies of like, okay, these movies are both the same plot, so what screenwriters were talking to one another and just kind of like stole each other's ideas and happened to sell it at the same time. Yeah. Let's move on then to your next game, Frank. Skatebird. Tell me a little bit about your time with Skatebird.
Yeah, so this is another Game Pass game, and they kind of added it while I've had my subscription, so that was cool to go back in and just kind of download this. And I also downloaded Superliminal, which I haven't checked out yet. But ultimately with Skatebird, like I didn't think I was going to spend a ton of time with this one, and I really didn't. I put in like maybe an hour, and I probably won't be going back for any more. It's definitely another one that I was like, I'm not super hot on it, and I didn't think I'd be, because like I just based off of the gameplay, I could tell like I probably wasn't gonna like this. Like it's a lot slower and heavier than like it just
Than
like
a Tony
it's
Hawk?
hard.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, because I love Tony Hawk, and I know there's a ton of these other skating games, but they always are like kind of slow and heavy, and they a lot of times they go for more of like a skate kind of feel, which is its own thing. And I can kind of usually get a good gauge just by seeing the gameplay. And so the trailer for Skatebird like didn't have me like super high hoped, but I also like, I mean, it's a small team with like a couple people on it. So that's also why I want to be like, nice to them. I almost was going to tweet out some thoughts, but then I was like, I'm not going to just be negative against this small team that made a Skatebird game,
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, like, I think it does do a lot of fun, like harkening back to old Tony Hawk, especially where like the first level is kind of like you try in this like kid's bedroom, and the layout is like all just things that would be found there, like pizza boxes and pencils and random stuff, but you can just skate around and do tricks, and there's people to pick up missions from, and like that's very old Tony Hawk. And like, but even pretty quickly, like within that hour of just going around and being in that room, and I didn't even get to the part where you unlock the next level, because that one room has like 20 missions. And like I got through like half of them, and I was just like, yeah, I'm pretty much just like done. Like I just didn't really have that drive to keep going, but like it's still a cute little like fun game, and it's a great Game Pass thing I was able to just download and play with. But I don't I don't think anyone, even if you are like a skating fan, is going to get like a ton of time out of this one. I just think it's there to just kind of mess around with, and you get to customize like your character, which was like one of the better parts.
Yeah, it's I admittedly I backed this on Kickstarter back when, because it was debuted in one of the, I think maybe the first even Kind of Funny Games showcase. They kind of debuted it and were like, hey, Kickstarter now or whatever, and I was like, that's a cute idea. Even though I'm not like a, a skating fan or anything like that, I wanted to support pretty much everything that was coming out of that first showcase as I could. So I went and backed them on Kickstarter. So I have like the Steam code sitting in my inbox, because like that was a reward long before they announced that it was going to be a Game Pass game. So it's one that I'll either hop on in Steam and check out a little bit at some point, or I'll download it on Game Pass, kind of do the same thing just to see. I'm guessing my name is in the credits somewhere in there as a result. So yeah, it's a game I've kind of had my eye on for a while, even though as like I continued to see more and more of it, I was like, this really isn't going to be a Trevor kind of game. It's just going to be like, oh, okay, it's a cool thing. Like I love that, it obviously like it's had, a ton of, bird themed puns like Tiny Hawk and stuff over the last couple of years as we've seen more and more of it. Cause I remember like even the year that, like when it was first shown off, it was like that ended up being like one of the stories of E3 or something like that was, or I guess it was probably the second Game Awards then, or the second game showcase when it got like announced, because the first one was around in the PSX vacuum basically, but it was like, that was one of the big stories coming out of E3 was like this little skatebird game and how well it was doing on Kickstarter, against all of the, column inches that all these other big games were getting or something like this. These little guys had a cool little idea that was, making waves in the small indie community kind of thing. So, but yeah, it's like as soon as you started talking, it's like, oh, I mean, like obviously one of the most iconic elements of Tony Hawk is like the soundtrack, and I'm guessing these guys don't have like a crazy indie rock soundtrack to go along with all that skatebird skating. So that's probably also going to be another element that's going to probably have you end up being like, yeah, I can walk away from this sooner than later.
Yeah, I do totally agree with that because I think that's a good call out. And like the music in the game isn't bad. And I specifically like didn't have my headphones in and was like paying, like had my like speaker or my sound bar on and was like trying to like pay attention to the game because I was like, I wonder how the sound is of like the music. And like I think it's fine, but it's definitely not like that Tony Hawk level soundtrack that can really keep you going and not only keep you pumped up, but it's like when your favorite track comes on and you're like, this is the run, I'm gonna do it. Like I can do it. And that's another thing too, is like Skatebird isn't like run based. It's like your open world in that kind of room or that map. There's different levels, but I was only on that first level. And you're just kind of going around and talking to the NPCs and picking up their missions. And then like the new NPCs will spawn and kind of show up in new places once you complete the old ones. But that's definitely like some of that older Tony Hawk too. But I think even Skatebird probably could be better serviced if they just went full Tony Hawk and it was like 2-minute runs in this room and everything, all the objectives were just all there the entire time. And they just give you an objective list instead of making you go like mission by mission by mission by mission. I think it probably would be a better, stronger thing. But that's just like, something that like, in my opinion, at least. And that's also why if it controlled a little bit better, I think that would also make it just a little bit more fun.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, it's definitely of us, you were the one I thought that might enjoy this one the most, just because of your diehard Tony Hawk nature. But like, I mean, all of the things you're saying make sense as to why maybe this game just isn't clicking, because it's not Tony Hawk. It's another skateboarding game. And it's a cute enough idea, and you can have fun customizing. Like the image I pulled, that's been here on the video version of the podcast, is a little orange and yellow bird on a skateboard with a pirate hat and a boat and a black bow tie. Just you can have some fun customizing your little bird dude. And yeah, it's again, it's something I hope to still try and check out, but I also expect I'm not gonna stick with that one. It's probably not gonna like race up the ranks in my game of the year stuff. Is this anything you've got your eye on, Cam? You're another Tony Hawk fan?
Yeah, I mean, I have always had my reservations about it because I have always kind of had a feeling that this was going to be a very fun novelty game, but it was going to be more novelty than fun.
Okay.
When I like when I look at it and I see what people have been saying about it, like it is what it is. Like it's a fun little game. People have a lot of fun with it, and that's great. But like it's not something that I'm going to be putting my time into. There's a lot of other games out right now that have my attention and that I want to get to. After Deathloop, I want to get to Tales of Arise.
That's going to be a beefy one.
Yep. I knew the end of this year was going to be a cantankerous, like very, very difficult to find time to play games. Time of the year, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I keep seeing people giving their status updates of where they are in Final Fantasy 14 in the lead up to Endwalker. I'm like, oh, I definitely need to get back to that and finish the Heavensward patch missions and stuff like that, and move on to Stormblood and Shadowbringers still. So that's going to be a busy thing I need to keep circling back to here in the next couple months.
Oh, by the way, I found out there's a way that we could actually go in and do the Coils of Bahamut without anybody else, Trevor.
Cool. Good to know.
Because I finished the Coils of Bahamut by myself.
Congrats. Nice. So
I did that this week. Yeah.
You'll carry me through them. If you could do it alone, then you can probably carry me through it. Yeah. So.
Oh, it'll be so easy with two people.
Okay.
Doing it solo was like, there are some fights where it's really hard because it's hard to do it by yourself because it's not built for that. But but I'm level 80 and I'm a tank, so I can do it.
Yeah, I'm 67. I remember we touched on that last time of where I was, and 67 is where I was when I checked in and got my Final Fantasy 14 or my Final Fantasy 15 car
Nice.
from the event that's going on right now. So got the regalia. I didn't realize it wasn't just like a reward for the quests, but I was like, I've got the 200,000 GP to spend at the Gold Saucer, so I will.
Yeah, I had no idea how you acquired that so fast.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, because it was. I haven't bought like anything really else from the Gold Saucer, and since like the first like real event I was doing was like everything when I came into the game it was like everything at the Gold Saucer is like you're getting 50% extra GP, so I was just making out like a bandit on all of those little quests and stuff like that. So
Nice.
but yeah, anyway, Skatebird, thank you for the thoughts there, Frank. So let's throw it over to you, Cameron, for Hindsight 2020. This is a game you were really high on at PAX last year. And then you and I spoke about this a couple weeks ago, but I don't think the embargo had dropped yet, so we didn't. So this is the first time talking about it really on a podcast. So what are your thoughts, kind of now having played it for review, kind of in the full iteration of the game? For audio listeners, he's kind of giving a big old exacerbated head scratching kind of hands on eyes, trying to find the words. I've given him more than enough time for this exaggerated pregnant pause.
I'm so disappointed.
That sucks, 'cause it was really cool at PAX.
It was amazingly cool at PAX, but the difference between it being a PAX demo and a fully fleshed out game, fully fleshed out and like full-fledged game is there's higher expectations. I had expected them to work on this game and to make it better than what we saw at PAX, and it is not. I couldn't tell you the difference between what I played at PAX and what I played like here. I am so disappointed with this game.
So you're saying kind of the PAX demo turns out was just kind of a slice of the final game that they probably went and worked on the rest of the game?
Yeah, pretty much. And honestly, something that I didn't realize at the time because it was a demo, but like that I realized now while playing it. There's several facets. Let me go ahead and break it down. So first off, it drops you in
real quick just before we dive into any of that. Even like what's kind of the overall pitch of Hindsight 2020? It is an indie game, a lesser known like Skatebird. We've been hearing about for a little while. 12 minutes, I think, had the big Xbox stage, so we didn't really need to dive into that. But Hindsight 2020, as like I don't even remember really what this one was about until you started talking about it, and I looked at it, and like the big selling point they had was like people behind BioWare games and
Sucker Punch
and Sucker Punch
and
and stuff. Yeah, like people from those
yeah.
studios worked on this game. But what is the game itself?
The game itself, so it is Hindsight 2020 is a game based off, like, taken a great deal from Hindu lore and mythology, and uses that to kind of tell a story of a young man who is caught in a difficult situation at the beginning of the game, where he is having to make a decision about how he basically finds himself in a situation where essentially he's been branded an outlaw. And his father's been murdered by the sheriff of the town, and who was his father's best friend. And so there's like a big lead up to this, and then it places a lot of emphasis on choices, and those choices being, this is a game that, like, I was super proud of, that we, like, my words that when I described this game were on their marketing, on their website and stuff. Like, I was super impressed by what I saw at PAX, and I talked about how, it uses a lot of, like, morally gray areas to kind of show and showcase a different kind of, like, a different kind of approach to these more complicated situations where, you're fought, like, but the biggest problem that this game now has is in its context. The slice that I played at at PAX East 2020 is the beginning of the game. The problem is that that's not the beginning of the story of the game. The game's story starts before this, and so there's difficulty in connecting to these characters right off the bat, because instead of it being like, oh, we're going to introduce characters, it's just exposition dumps. You're immediately supposed to care for a character that you haven't met yet, who is, you are told, is your best friend. But, like, and a lot of it comes down to just kind of, like, really not interesting.
So it's like they do a lot of tell, don't show instead of show, don't tell.
Almost everything is tell, don't show. And I get very frustrated by, I found myself getting very frustrated by, like, what I thought was, like, interesting for, like, a demo thing. But when playing through it, and everybody, so I chose, like, so there's two weapons you can use. One is an electric stun rod, and the other is a sword. And depending on, like, and the cool thing about what they were doing with the game was, enemies would approach you differently depending on which weapon you were using. So if you were using the sword, they would be much more, like, trepidatious getting near you. And if you had the stun rod, they would try to swarm you. And so there was this entire situation with the stun rod, though, where you could use it for combos to do massive area attacks. And I was really looking forward to the combat of this game because of how unique it was at the time. But playing through it recently, I've realized that, like, there is nothing deeper to the combat. Like, the combat is what it is. And on top of that, it feel like, honestly, there are parts of this game that feel like a demo. Or like an early beta version of a game.
Mm-hmm.
But with just, like, how the systems don't necessarily work the way you want them to. And there's a lot of promise that kind of had this intrigue about this game, and I couldn't wait to see a lot of, like, what kind of, like, got me to the point where the demo was at PAX. I couldn't wait to see what happened. And then for it just to have, like, a weird introduction screen to basically be like, oh yeah, by the way, your character's aware that, like, he has an opportunity to go back in time and stop the bad things from happening. But you immediately get thrown into a situation where, like, none of your dialogue emphasizes any of that you have any pre-existing information about it outside of, like, some narrative parts like before or after certain parts of the game. There's no, like, there's a lot of missing context to this game. And one of the worst things about it is that the context is given to you in these exposition dumps, done in a way that when you're talking to somebody, nobody sounds different. And I don't mean that and this is a big thing that, like, a lot of people may not realize in the modern age of voice acting. When you have a game that doesn't have voice acting, you need your characters to sound different from each other. Every single character sounded the exact same. And by that I mean everybody used the same way of speaking. There was never any variation from it. Everybody talked with this very same bland, like nobody had oh, like you, like what, like you're attacking us. You're an outlaw, yada yada. Everybody was just after you beat them, they're all like, because I used the peaceful means. They're like, even though like everybody had the same line of, even though you we're fighting you, we respect that you have acknowledged and respected the peaceful, like the pacifistic ways of our village. Which every single person saying that was just like got annoying.
Yeah.
And to the point where I wish I had taken out the sword instead. But like, yeah, there's just a lot of things that you just don't have a lot of availability to that I thought were going to be features in the game when the game finally came out that ended up being, nope, just same as the demo. And I'm like, what? And then by the time you get out into the greater part of the world, it is like the actual open world part of like exploring the village and stuff. Nothing's really there. Everything is kind of just like bland and the same everywhere. Man, it's tough. It's tough because this is a game that I thought I had a lot of potential, and to see it just like not reach any of that potential whatsoever is just really disappointing. And yeah. I had to take a moment to look back and think to myself, hey, did I put like undue expectations on this game? Did I expect this game to be more than it actually was promising itself it would be? And I wasn't. Like I remember conversations I had with with one of the developers at PAX. And I can see from like other people's previews and kind of looking through this, like we were given the impression that this was a slice of a game that was going to have a lot more to it, and not getting that from it has left me very sad about this game. Like this game almost like, I'm really glad I gave Welcome to Elk my game of the show, because I was leaning towards giving Hindsight 2020 my game of the show.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm really glad I didn't, because man, it would have been what a waste. This game, yeah, I don't know.
I wonder if or how much of that suffered from the pandemic, because obviously like that's the last time we really saw this, and who knows how that team was able to like really work and pivot into the last year and a half following kind of that. If they maybe had grand aspirations, but then they were like, hey, we're gonna run out of money, so we kind of got to do what we got to do and just get this game out sooner or something like that.
The game was delayed by a year.
It was supposed to come out last year?
Yeah, it was supposed to come out last year. And like
then there's also that whole like Hindsight 2020 being having a whole other connotation from last year as well.
Yeah, 100%. Like there's a lot about this game that honestly, there's a lot of like interesting ideas and kernels of what this game could have been. But it was just done in a way that I don't know. I don't know what their plan was for execution if this was going to be coming out last year.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so much about this game that like I felt when I played it at PAX East, I was like, well, this is just a demo. It makes sense why certain things are locked out. And like when I was talking to one of the developers, it definitely came off that way. But from what I played through it and how I experienced it, like, man, like just, it's not a good game. Like it's not a fun game. It's not a good game. Things aren't like the combat isn't tighter than it was in that demo, which is a problem because it was a little loose at the time, even then. And I asked him about it, and I didn't want to be like, yeah, tighten up the controls on level 5 or whatever. Like from that old not DeVry, but like an old commercial for like a video game school. Yeah, no, it's really difficult because I look at this game and I think to myself, man, like really cool ideas, really cool playing off of the Rakasha mythos out of Hindu lore, and just doesn't deliver.
Yeah, that's
on any level.
What were you gonna say, Frank?
No, I was gonna say the same thing. Like that's just a shame, and like it's really unfortunate to hear because I checked it out at PAX and like you were so glowing about it. Even Christian had said he checked it out and had such an interesting experience with it that I went and played it, and like but I totally feel everything you're saying because it was pretty basic and it was a little bit loose and there was some things there, but it's a shame to hear that like it didn't really come together in the end because they had like a lot of really cool ideas. I thought.
Yeah, hearing you talk about that, it reminds me I had a very similar experience with Raji, an ancient epic.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
I didn't play it at PAX last year, but like Logan was so high on it and gave it his game of the show at PAX. And so like when it finally came out last year, I checked it out and was ultimately like, oh, this has like kernels of interesting ideas, but yeah, they just like, I don't know if they just shot too high, or they just ran out of time and couldn't kind of execute on their aspirations, or they're hoping that like, oh, when we do the eventual sequel, we'll build on these systems and these ideas and stuff. But at the same time, like, so like, I mean, it was one of those, like, it was one of the few games that like just didn't rank in my game of the year last year, because I just didn't think too highly of it. Whereas it was like very high on Logan's list, but Logan also plays significantly fewer games than I do. And that, all that said, and I'll say this for Hindsight as well, having not played it, I still have an appreciation that these games are out there and exist, because like both of them center around Hindi kind of mythology and those kinds of ideas and stories and characters and concepts, and we don't get nearly enough of those. And so I likened it when I would talk to Logan about it, of like, well, I didn't like this game, I appreciated that it introduced me to things that I didn't know about, in the same way that I know way more about Norse mythology and stuff after Hellblade and God of War and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, so that like the next time those ideas and stuff get introduced to me in a larger, more mainstream, or in the next game, a lot of that information has been exposed to me, and I'm introduced to it, and it will probably stick better than it. Like I didn't, the stories of Brahma and Shiva and stuff didn't stick with me outside of the stuff I'd kind of known tangentially over the years, but it was still cool that existed in Raji, and it was kind of like an interesting way to deliver some of those concepts. And so hopefully Hindsight has some grain of that. Obviously I can't speak to it directly, having not played it myself, but hopefully there is some value to that for somebody who picks up this game and kind of moves forward with it. I don't know if it would have that with you, because you, like, I mean, I remember back from the preview of it when I was editing that with you, like you clearly knew a lot more about any of that element than I did already, and we're kind of more educated on some of that background stuff there, Cam. So I don't know if you necessarily have that same takeaway, but hopefully, like, I hope we continue to see games.
Same. Oh yeah, for sure.
Kind of explore these ideas and these cultural topics and touchstones and stuff like that.
Like the legends of Hindu gods and like the Hindu mythology, is we're talking about really awesome stuff.
I
really
want to correct myself there. Well, like, I mean, probably shouldn't say Hindu mythology so much as religion. Obviously, that it is still a very highly active, I would say, religion compared to like Greek mythology. I don't think there are many people like really praying to Zeus and whatnot. And I think that's I
can see. Yeah, that's a fair criticism to be laying at me, saying, "Hey, Cameron, that's a fucking religion."
I'm saying it at myself more than anything, because I said it first, and you kind of maybe like carried that.
No, but early on, I talked about Hindu mythology.
Oh, okay.
So 100%, that's also on me. Like, I should be watching my fucking tone. Granted, I also call Christian mythology, Christian religion, mythology. Mythos is mythos, regardless whether or not you believe that it's true. That being said, I do want to offer my respect towards the Hindu community and the Hindu religion. It is awesome. It is epic. The stories of whether it's the whether it's the gods, whether it's the epic heroes of yore, whether it's, there's so many great, awesome, super cool stories that get told, and they're on the scale of like cosmic, like combat is like on a cosmic scale sometimes. Like it is massive. Like it can, like these stories can be told in such an epic and cool way in video games, and they're just not, and that sucks.
Mm-hmm. But hopefully hopefully we will
I want to
see
see more. I want to see more.
That, it picked up as games writing teams get more diverse and start wanting to kind of examine and tell those stories. I remember even admittedly, so I watched The Good Dinosaur for our friends over at the Castle Vault when I was a guest on their show earlier this year, and I sat down and watched that was the one Pixar movie I'd never watched, and I watched the short that came along with it, and it was a short written by an Indian man that likened the Hindi gods to like the superheroes that like he loved playing with growing up, and it was this like it was easily the highlight of the experience. Like watching that 7-minute short was way better than watching the Good Dinosaur, and it was like, oh, this is like a really cool interpretation that makes this more accessible and just kind of uses the iconography and the imagery, and I love that was he had that opportunity because Pixar had hired him and let him kind of tell this very personal story to him, that was, based on kind of those stories that he had from growing up. So I love seeing that just more and more in mainstream and being exposed to those kinds of ideas, because I've seen far too many things on Jesus and God and all that stuff. So
for sure.
And I say as a Christian boy growing up. So
yeah, I will say, like, one of the coolest stories is literally the story of a god named Karna, who is a half god who goes to war with like one of his his story is one of he's a god dedicated towards kindness and service, mm-hmm. and helping others, to the point where he's in his epic in this epic battle against his rival, and it is an entire thing, and he has an opportunity to kill his rival when his rival's chariot breaks or gets stuck in the mud, or for some reason is disabled, and he has the perfect opportunity to kill his rival at that moment. But rather than do that and take that advantage, he instead gets off of his own and fixes his chariot for him. And it's an entire it's such a cool. There are so many cool and awesome stories coming out of the Hindu religion and their scriptures and what they have going for them that could be amazing and awesome to tell in these formats like video games, that I really hope that the fact that the two game Indian based Hindu religious background games that have come out recently were those of didn't get great rave reviews from us. I hope that is not seen as an indication that we're not interested in these stories. I am extremely interested in these stories, and I mm-hmm. want more of them. I would just like it to be, the
gameplay to be a little more engaging, and yeah. That's I appreciate that. So, yeah. Cool. So moving on to we're definitely in the indie block of our show here. So let's take it back to you, Frank, for Genesis Noir. Tell me about this game. This is a game I heard people kind of singing praises of earlier this year, and it was on Game Pass, and I looked into, and I think I downloaded it to my Xbox, and I just never actually sat down and played it. So when you brought it up as oh, you sat down and played this, I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are on it.
I really loved it, and I'm glad to hear that you also heard some other people who were kind of positive about it, because this is totally one that I have not heard anyone at all talk about. I just remember it I think it was in some kind of a showcase at some point, because I remember seeing the trailer on Twitter later and then being this looks really interesting, and then the fact that it finally came out and was on Game Pass, I found it when I was just kind of scrolling through games. I ended up downloading 24, and this is definitely one of those I picked up where I'm I want to check this out, and It's just a really cool, like, narrative sort of adventure game, and I think it was really interesting to play, sort of close to the Artful Escape because I think it's actually a very similar game in a lot of ways. It's definitely a little bit more puzzly and adventure gamey and the kind of what you have to do, but it just kind of takes you on this crazy visual journey. But what really impressed me about it is that they're able to do so much with that black and white and sometimes like little hints of gold, and that like that's most of the color scheme because it's a noir game, so it's just black and gray and white. But like they're able to do some really crazy visuals that are like super psychedelic and trippy, but it's crazy that it's all like monochromed,
Hmm.
like so that's something that I really liked about it is that it's just telling you this really cool like noir kind of detective story where it's and the entire game is show don't tell. There's like no dialogue basically. And you're just kind of going through and piecing these things together and experiencing all these crazy visuals and putting together clues. And like I really just enjoyed it, especially with the music. That's the other thing I want to talk about is besides the visuals, this has like this crazy noir jazz soundtrack with like a ton of saxophone, and there's like sax solos, and it's totally that like walking down the black street at night with like the smoke coming up, and it's like that lone saxophone, and I was like I loved that, man. Like this is definitely a standout for me.
Excellent. That's so awesome to hear. I remember seeing this, and when you brought it up, I was like looking and pulling some images for it, and it immediately struck me as like having a. I don't know if you saw the movie Soul on Disney
Mm,
Plus. I don't remember. I don't think we did an episode on that or anything yet.
mm,
But that had obviously it's a Pixar movie, but it also has like very 2D elements in it in some of the, like the character design and stuff, and like the 2D characters are these ethereal, like we exist outside of like the living kind of like before, before life and afterlife, kind of the great before and the great beyond, I think is kind of what they referred to that area as. And those characters have a similar look in that they're like
mm.
they're kind of like almost as if they were drawn by a single line, just kind of a single like one line to like doodle the character kind of thing. And I saw like similar touches of that. And Soul obviously also has a ton of like jazz influences and highlights in it as well. So I love the kind of the connection maybe there between those ideas. So what is so you mentioned it's like an adventure game. Is this another one that you like just immediately kind of dove in with a guide on, or was this a little bit more welcoming to your kind of exploration and like trying to solve what's going on, compared to 12 minutes?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot simpler and easier, and I was able to beat the entire game pretty much without a guide. I defaulted to using one for one particularly. Like, there's one chapter that is very like puzzle based, and it's like one puzzle that keeps evolving and getting harder, and you need to keep solving it. And it's an interesting setup, and the answers are definitely there. But I just got annoyed and defaulted to a guide. Like at first, you're messing with like lab equipment and there's literally a blackboard that has like what they want you to do on it, and I totally didn't see the blackboard because it's like the screen is just on the equipment. You need to like click and pan over to it. And like so that's when I finally defaulted to the guide, and then when I was like, oh okay, that's what they want me to do, I did like one or two on my own, and then I just went back to the guide because it gets so complicated when there's like six pieces of equipment they want you to tune and dial in. um but that's why like for the most part, that's one thing I'll definitely give it credit for is like it's not like simplistic in an annoying way, but it is just super simple and easy, and usually you can figure out whatever you need to do just by interacting with everything in the environment. It's not an adventure game in the way of like you collect an inventory that you keep with you and you need to figure out what in your inventory works with the environment. If you need to pick up something and do something with it, you're pretty much like doing it in that screen where like or there was one point where I had to go walk away from a guy who wanted some items, and then I had to go collect those items and come back. But it's so contained to like the chapter because it's chapter based. I guess I should explain too is that it's
Yeah.
kind of like you kind of go into these little worlds and it kind of sets up a whole landscape for you to explore and play with. And it like at one point there's a whole world that involves like it's like the first world involves like planting seeds, and then you're growing those and kind of creating life. And then it's kind of each way you're kind of evolving the seed to get it to grow into like a tree is different, and it's like a unique kind of weird little puzzle. But it's so simple because you can just kind of figure out like what is in the environment, what can I interact with. And one of them is literally like you have to grab the sun in the sky, and then you have to use the stick to like basically spin time forward, and the tree like grows out of the ground and you can get to wherever you're trying to go. um there's a lot, it uses that same mechanic a lot of times where you have to like fast forward time or just like move things in that kind of similar fashion by spinning them. And that was something I always thought was super cool because there's a part where you're basically like spinning a vinyl record around, and then like I thought that part was super cool. My favorite part that I'll ruin a little bit is like it's like one of the middle chapters that's definitely about like a jazz musician, so it gets even more jazzy and noir than it already is. But then they start telling the story in like a comic book panel fashion, but it's like so like it starts off with one screen and it's like you walking into the subway, and then the next panel comes in and it's like you getting on the subway, and then you grab the subway and you have to like hold left so or right so it like moves, and then the third panel comes in from the bottom and it's the subway like running on the tracks. And like I thought it was cool that like you have to keep interacting with it to keep it going, but it's basically just building a comic book kind of page that's like explaining to you how he's traveling from one place to the other. And I was that was like my favorite like set piece where I was like, this is an incredible visual that's like really cool, and this train is going from like panel to panel to panel. Like that was definitely like my favorite part for sure.
Nice, very cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's yeah, you've been having a good run of like the maybe 12 minutes aside, but a good run of the little art house kind of like indie games with Artful Escape and now this. So very cool. Any closing thoughts before we move on to the last game of the episode?
No, not a ton. I think I kind of hit most of my main points with it. Oh, one thing I actually will say kind of against it is it tells an interesting story, but I think it could have done that a little bit stronger because definitely by the end, it's not even that the story's not interesting. It's that I don't think they tell it as good as they could have. Like there were definitely things where I didn't get like the entire picture by like I saw everything. I did everything because it's not like there's secrets and stuff you can miss, but it's so just showing you visuals and kind of some of the set pieces are so crazy and weird that it's kind of hard to put everything all together into one cohesive story at the end, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it still does tell an interesting story, and it actually has like a branching ending based on like you get to make a decision and kind of like branch out that way. And I went and did both just because I was kind of like curious. And my ultimate thing was it's a game I would recommend to everybody, especially because it is on Game Pass. And if you're even into anything like the Artful Escape, I think you'd really enjoy this too. And if you're into just jazz and noir stuff, I think it's definitely worth your time. I think it's definitely going to be on my game of the year list. I think it might be towards a little bit towards like the bottom, but I think it's going to be on there for sure.
Cool. Very cool. Well, the last game we have for today that is a game I'm bringing to the table after finishing Deathloop last night. I basically went and bought and downloaded and booted up this morning Toem, a photo adventure or something like that. I don't remember if that's the actual subtitle. But this is admittedly this is probably mostly on my radar because our friends over at Pop Agenda worked on and promoted this game. However, my version is a retail copy. I didn't reach out for a code or anything like that. And it is a black and white, hand-drawn little kind of puzzle adventure game where your main mechanic is you're taking pictures of things. It almost opens a la like a Pokemon game where it's basically like, hey, it's time for you to go on your adventure, son. So here's your camera and go out and see the world. You're just going to go and adventure. And so instead of collecting Pokemon, you're just taking pictures of creatures in the environment or just other elements in the environment. A lot of the mechanic of the game basically is like you'll encounter people and they'll ask you to take a picture of something, so you go find that thing in one of the nearby screens, you take a picture, you bring it back and you show it to them and say, yep, here's the thing you were looking for. And you can like do a little bit of like light editing on those pictures, and at some point I got a tripod so far, so I can like I can set up the tripod and then go like walk over so I can be like better in frame, because you can also of course take a selfie or something like that, but you can do a more artistic version. You can I don't think there's like anything in the way of filters that might come up down the line. I'm still only an hour or so in at this point. But it's just a fun little, very chill game, especially after something like Deathloop. It is just kind of like, I went through, it's one of the Let's Plays that we'll have probably up on the channel this week. Cause I sat down and just kind of like recorded my first, 45 minutes of the game or something like that. First couple areas basically of the game. And it's just like, to travel from like area to area, you need to get some collection of stamps, some number of stamps, and you collect stamps by, doing missions for people, like like, hey, we want you to take pictures of these 3 things. So I go take pictures of those 3 things. I bring them back. And I say, here's the 3 things. And they say, hey, great, here's a stamp. And you just put it in like a little community help book or something like that. Community album, I think. And you can also, like, as you're taking pictures of things, they'll have like an icon, and they're basically like, oh, if it's got an icon of like a snail, that's going to go into the catalog of, the pictures that you can take. At some point, there's a Portillo from, of course, Greg Miller and Geneviève Saint-Onge Miller. So at some point, I'll get to take a picture of Portillo and add him into, because they basically have the pets of all the developers as like,
That's awesome,
scattered around the game. And then I think there's even a trophy for basically like taking a picture of everyone's pet. So yeah, I very much look forward to eventually finding Portillo in the game and taking that picture and sharing that out. Have not found him yet. But yeah,
this sounds incredibly sweet and like nice.
Oh, it is. It is.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it
sounds,
yeah.
This
it
sounds
is,
like cottage core level shit of like just easygoing peacefulness. I love this.
Oh yeah, it is. It is the most delightful, charming little thing. No combat or anything. There are like one of the quests I have that I'm working my way through is like there are monsters, but they stay hidden, and so you kind of have to like take pictures of the monsters. In the one of them is like hidden in the bushes. One of them is like a Loch Ness monster, and so you kind of have to like figure out how to take a picture of him, because if you get too close, he'll go back under the surface or something like that. So that's where like, oh, I can set up the tripod, walk away, then he'll like surface and I can take the picture and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just a fun little puzzle game. Nothing I've not encountered anything like where it's like I don't know how to do this, or like there was one where it's like I don't know what you need me to take a picture of, and like it was somebody like very early on, somebody was like, hey, can you take a picture of our hotel? We want to use it in our marketing material. So I go outside, I take a picture of the hotel, and he's like, well, we want a picture of the whole thing. And this looks like you're cutting off some stuff. So here's what you can do. You can go to the lookout point nearby. And I was like, okay, that's what I need to do. Go to the lookout point, and then you can kind of take the picture from there and stuff like that. So yeah, it is very charming. You also, as you go through a lot of these things, there's like a lot of like aesthetic things that you can collect and find. Like one of the first things I found was a foam finger. So I've just kind of got a foam finger equipped, and I'm walking around with a big foam finger on my guy. I also picked up a pair of sunglasses that were called ghost glasses. And it was interesting because like right before that, I went in and was like using the viewfinder, and I could see a ghost in the thing. I was like, oh, there's a ghost there. Okay, what do I need? Like, how do I interact with this ghost? But I couldn't talk to him. And then like a screen later, this guy gave me ghost glasses that while they're equipped, I can see the ghosts even when I'm not looking through the viewfinder. And now I can talk to the ghosts. So like, yeah, there's just fun little, and also I had also gone to a place where like one of the objectives was like take a photo of a ... DJ, and I was like, okay, where am I gonna find it? Where do I take a picture of a DJ? And I go to a place here in the woods or something, and there's a bear kind of like standing as a bouncer, and you hear kind of like low bass boom 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 kind of like from the next screen. I'm like, okay, that's probably where the club is. That's probably where I'm gonna find a DJ. So I go talk to the bear, and he's like, you don't have enough swag. I'm like, what do you mean I don't have enough swag? Look at my foam finger, I look awesome. But then I go and find these sunglasses. I'm like, I bet now that I've got these sunglasses, I have enough swag. And sure enough, he let me pass. And then I go into this little screen, and there's just a whole bunch of like dancing bears with sunglasses and glow sticks, and like a moose DJ in the background kind of just spinning some records. And I was just like, this is just lovely. This is just weird and funny and lovely. And so, yeah, I'm having a great time with this one. From the kind of the review guide that Pop Agenda had originally sent out, like the game's probably 4 hours, 8 if you want to like do everything in it. But yeah, so it's another game that I'll probably like wrap up here in the next day or two, but it's just fun and charming, and I'm having a good time with it. It is a delightful little gem of an art house kind of game. That is Toem, Toem. I believe it's available on like PlayStation and Switch and probably PC. So not one of the many Xbox Game Pass games we've talked about today. But yeah. So yeah, that's Toem. Yeah. Okay,
I can't wait to check that one out. Like it obviously, I mean, you had me even more excited than I was already, but based on the trailers, I was really interested in it. And like one of my favorite games last year was Umurangi Generation.
Right. I remember
which
talking
like
about that one.
it took like the photo aspect, I think, a little bit more like seriously, but and it was also definitely more of like a dystopian setting. So I like the idea of taking some of those elements and putting them in like the cutesy, wholesome kind of cartoony world. I think it makes it a little bit more fun, and it seems like there's even a little bit more like narrative tied to it too, which is definitely fun.
Yeah, you
So that's
also
why I can't wait.
you can also get like, attachments for your camera. Like I picked up a horn, which now I can use like basically like Pokemon cut style to, oh, there were seagulls blocking my path, but now if I go to take a picture of them and honk the horn on my camera, they scatter, and I can now move on to the area that they were blocking off and stuff like that. So yeah, there's just little fun puzzle elements to it. I don't know how deep that kind of like idea and mechanic goes to it, but I look forward to continue to kind of explore it and just see what the game has in store for me, what fun little delightful surprises it will continue to provide for me. So yeah, that's the last one I wanted to talk about. So I think that is gonna do it for this week's episode. Thank you guys for joining me to talk about all these fun flurry of games. We got our Deathloop, and then we got like our 5 indie barrage of games. So let's go around the metaphorical table with any plugs we might have. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our other podcast, that D Plus show. This most recent episode is Doogie. I had to look it up. I had to double check here because it's Kamaloha MD. Is that what it is? The reboot?
Kame Aloha. Yeah.
Okay.
It's basically Doogie Howser, but now it's a girl. It's a Hawaiian girl who, in the Doogie Howser role. So yeah, it's really good. I really enjoyed it. I sat down with that last week. For D Plus, and originally I was just going to do like the pilot episode after Cam and I did Turner Hooch the prior week, and I ended up enjoying it enough to watch like the second episode the next day on my lunch break, and just kind of sat down. And since nobody else was able to join me for that one, it's a solo episode of that D Plus show. But yeah, I gave it an A-. And I basically have described it as like this would fit in entirely well if like there was a modern TGIF block. This would be, a very fitting kind of, family drama mixed with like case of the week kind of, a la, the original Doogie Howser and stuff. And yeah, just a cute little show. Lots of charming people in it. One of my favorite discoveries was the dad on the show is one of Griff's gang from Back to the Future 2. Jason Lee Scott, I believe is the actor's name. Most recently, he was the bad guy in Mulan, in the live-action Mulan, but he was like going all the way back there. He was one of Griff's like bad guys in the 2015 Back to the Future world or whatever that Marty goes to in Back to the Future 2. And I was like, oh crap, that was him. He's also like, he's in much more like prominent things. Like he's David in Lilo and Stitch and stuff like that. And he played Bruce Lee in a movie called Dragon back in like the early 90s and stuff. So he's had a good career. But like that was like the first thing that jumped out. I was like, oh yeah, that is him. Neat. Oh, like 30 years later or whatever it's been. 35 years later. So yeah, go check out Doogie Kame Aloha MD. Cool. Like, I mean, I think I touched on this on the show as well. Like, it's a great show for representation in that, like, there's like 2 white people on the show. Like, one of them is the mom, and then one of them is like the best friend, and then everybody else is like, Hawaiian or Polynesian or Asian, African American. Like, there's a good breadth of kind of diversity in that cast, and that was really cool to see. So yeah. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I wanted to give a massive shout out to youtube.com/thatnerdy_site. We have some really fun Let's Plays up there that Trevor's been putting out on a regular basis. It's super good. And hopefully we'll have some fun stuff coming out for you later on. So.
Cool. Yeah. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will echo that shout out for the YouTube channel. Last week's episodes were my Artful Escape and Life is Strange, like first chunks. Life is Strange True Colors in particular. I basically did the full first chapter of that. Really, in both of those instances, I recorded those Let's Plays and then just played through the rest of their respective games pretty much all in one setting. This week, as I touched on, I basically will have like my first hour of Deathloop, I think, is going to be this week's Tuesday episode, and then probably Toem, for Thursday. But then, yeah, as we touched on earlier in the episode, Cam and I are, toying around with the idea of, invading each other's games or trying to do something along those lines, Let's Play wise. It's a matter of like, okay, if we do that, how do we best represent that? Like, do we try and get like footage from both of us going that we can splice together, or do I just like show you like my utter fear when Cameron invades my game and just give you that response, and don't listen to Cameron. He'll be laughing and being maniacal on his end, and I won't have any idea. I'll just be in utter terror. So we'll see how we end up kind of approaching that, but that is definitely something we have kind of in the works for a future Let's Play on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/thatnerdysite as well. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, and maybe even consider supporting us over on Patreon, patreon.com/thatnerdysite, where every patron gets early access to a monthly bonus episode of this show. This month's early access episode is me and Logan talking about Logan's ultimate not ranking the Phantom Menace #1 Star Wars rankings, since he wasn't able to join us for the wrap up of our summer of Star Wars. So
weird that he thought he had to recontextualize his love of Phantom Menace, though.
Yeah. I mean, he says in that episode that like he's probably way more on the vein with you. I think he specifically talks about that as like he is very content to throw that on and have that one playing in the background, on any given, Sunday or something like that. It's not one he needs to like sit down and like watch full focus on, but he's happy to have it playing, as opposed to he never wants to watch The Rise of Skywalker again or something like that.
Yep, I feel that one.
Yeah. So if you are one of our Patreon supporters at $1 or above, you can get early access to that episode, but it will go live to everybody here at the end of September, and then we'll have a whole new early access episode for people that probably have to figure out here and record next week with some people. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you, audience, for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.